everyone to the third module of Science Policy and Advocacy for STEM Scientists course.
Our next speaker, Baindu. Dr. Baindu Bayon is a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow in the NIH Office of the Director, focusing on small business innovation research and small business technology transfer, private sector collaboration, diversity, and cross-institute innovation initiatives. She has presented her work at several international conferences, including the Drug Discovery and Therapy World Congress. She has co-authored publications in several scientific journals, including the American Journal of Medical Genetics. She enjoys STEM outreach and driving youth towards solving problems with life science, and she has earned a myriad of awards throughout her career, including the Indianapolis Business Journal's 40 Under 40, and among her many leadership roles, she serves on the board of the directors for the AAAS Bethesda chapter for the Association of Women in Science, which she will talk about. She is passionate about the discovery, development, and commercialization of clinical innovations and the success of biotechnology companies from idea to launch. Today, she will talk about the intersection of race and gender, science policy, and how we can empower Black and Latina women who are underrepresented in academia. And she'll also address the work of AAAS in this space and discuss the AAAS STEM to Market program. Baindu?
All right, well, I like to actually start off with my Twitter handles. I like to tell folks in the beginning, you can go ahead and follow me on Twitter at my first name and last name. I am Baindu Bayon. I'm a current AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow. And from several of the other talks you've heard about, getting into science policy through policy fellowships. And so I am speaking from the perspective of someone who is currently, in a policy fellowship. But I wanted to actually intertwine going into policy with, diversity and tying that into identity. And so I'm just giving a brief background of my own identity and how that shapes my path and views. I'm a strong believer that your identity and how you view the world is going to affect what you're passionate about when it comes to science policy and what issues are going to be kind of most importance to you when it comes to that. So I am a first generation Sierra Leonean American. I have a large family. I'm number 4 or 5 kids. I have founded a couple of companies, and I am a Hoosier in the DMV. So I'm born and raised in Indiana, and I've lived in several other cities. And I think that, that perspective of being, a Midwestern lady with a global perspective actually has influenced my views on science policy. And I think a huge part of belonging, not only in science policy, but in STEM in general, impacts what you do at each step, and again, impacts how you view policy. And that sense of belonging is what is going to drive a lot of folks in this space. Knowing that you belong will drive your thoughts of yourself and the types of opportunities that you see yourself fitting into, and some of the cues that you receive, not only in STEM in general, but again, also in science policy, can affect what you're able to see yourself doing in the field. So just a brief overview of my path. I did my undergraduate research tenure at Indiana University, and then went on to work at the bench at Eli Lilly and Company before going to graduate school. Got my PhD at Indiana University School of Medicine, where I started to kind of interact with science policy unexpectedly. I worked with human fetal neuronal tissue, and at that time in Indiana, the use of those tissues became very controversial. And so that was my first taste of how science policy could directly affect me and what I was doing. And, being in those situations, was sometimes secondary, because in that position, you're already battling some of the issues of feeling like you belong, that uncertainty of not being able to fit in. Can you succeed in this environment? And so some of these other issues become less pertinent because you're just trying to make it. You're just trying to make sure that you can make it to the next phase. But with that interest, I was able to nurture uh, nurture those interests, and my PI helped me with that as well. And so I think that it's very important, no matter what stage of your training that you're in, when issues come up that are related to policy or issues come up that are directly affecting you, that you seek ways to learn more about them, that you make sure that the people who are supposed to be supporting you understand that you're interested so they can offer um, opportunities. And so I was at the time told about the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship and was encouraged to apply. And at the same time, I applied for a field sales position with stem cell technology. So I actually went on to field sales in Boston, the Boston-Cambridge area, and during my tenure there, um, found out that I was accepted to the AAAS Fellowship. And so again, using your interests to kind of fuel your path is a great entry into science policy. And then I, again, started the fellowship. Again, this gives, I don't know how much of this you all have spoken about prior, but the AAAS Policy Fellowship gives PhD level scientists that firsthand experience with policymaking. Most of us, do not do postdocs. Most of us either went to industry or are coming directly out of a PhD program and are given the opportunity to work in the executive, legislative, or judicial branch of the federal government in Washington, D.C., and are able to, again, get some of that firsthand experience. Now, you will never hear the same story about being a AAAS Science and Technology Fellow from two different fellows, because you are in different agencies, and that experience is going to be different for everyone. I was placed at the National Institutes of Health, and because of some of the issues I have touched upon, you may still encounter some of those same issues surrounding your identity and belonging or not belonging in science policy that you would encounter elsewhere in STEM. Those issues don't necessarily go away. But during my time, just to touch briefly upon some of the types of projects that you can work on as a AAAS policy fellow, I was able to contribute to congressional justification language for one of the very large programs at NIH. Having a large interest in entrepreneurship, I've been able to research and do analysis for a very large program, and it's the work that is done at academic centers surrounding entrepreneurship and commercialization. And furthermore, in the office where I currently sit, the Small Business Education and Entrepreneurial Development Office, or the SEED office, I've been able to interact directly with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs and residents on how to get their startups kind of off the ground, how to obtain more funding, and also putting together, standing up a diversity working group. We've realized that in small business, some of the issues surrounding women and so-called minorities in small business is an issue. And so I've been able to construct the charter for a diversity working group in that office. And so being able to make an impact in STEM, in science policy, is fulfilling and something that I didn't know existed as a career, as a graduate student, or before I came into the fellowship. And I became more and more interested in the representation of women in STEM, and specifically Black women in STEM and other minority women, as I went through all of those, different aspects of the STEM environment, from academia to industry and now to government, and I saw some of the same numbers, some of the same statistics, and started to wonder about those disparities. And so getting more involved with the Association for Women in Science has really given me some insight into how some of these situations are being addressed or not being addressed by various entities. So we know that the representation of women in STEM leadership grows in disparity with rank, while the opposite is true for men. And that is extremely jarring when you look at Black, Latinx, and Indigenous women. And the idea that there just aren't enough women to choose from, or there just aren't enough women of color to kind of fill in that pipeline is something that comes up often. But we know that this kind of pipeline metaphor as the reason for underrepresentation is faulty. And it not only emphasizes that, the women themselves are potentially just not interested or they don't have the ability, it places the onus on women and on people of color to solve this problem. And it, again, is something that I saw no matter what layer of science that I entered. And so this is just some interesting data when it comes to looking at women in STEM careers when you actually look at intersections of gender and race. And the reason why I think it is important to talk about gender and race is because they go hand in hand when discussing experiences of folks that are in two or more groups. And so you see that men's representation actually grows the higher up the academic hierarchy they go. And this is especially true for white and Asian men. And I bring this up because I'm also a little reluctant to use terms like, women of color or people of color, because sometimes those terms can kind of lump individuals together that are having very different experiences, specifically in the sciences, such as Asian men or even Asian women who experience science and belonging in STEM in a different way than their Black and Latinx counterparts. So again, we see that, women are earning these degrees in STEM and, generally are, doing well there in the bachelor's and master's areas. And then you get that sharp decline when you get to the dean and president level. You see changes. And so we want to see a distribution of representation, and that's what's lacking. The pool of women is there, but if organizations are not making a concerted effort to actually expand their network and bring those women into leadership positions, then that's where we start to see issues. And that's not only true in academia. When you look at the leadership in federally funded laboratories, again, this data is from the Association for Women in Science, as was the last slide. There are 42 labs included in this study, and although a relatively small number, you can still see white men holding a large percentage of leadership positions in these labs, and women of color occupying such a small percentage. And so again, a lack of representation in these key decision-making roles means not only are their expertise is just going underused, it's just underutilized, and that leads to a lessened power of influence, and that is a science policy issue because they directly affect how we decide which projects are important and the impact that they can make on these particular issues, and therefore not getting that representation and not getting their voices heard. I also wanted to just talk a little bit about, you know, when we talk about companies and we talk about entrepreneurship, it initially drew me in because women are very entrepreneurial in general. And in STEM, it's no different. Women actually tend to seek out entrepreneurship as a means to have more control over their innovations than they get in academia or in government. And so it's not for a lack of ambition or a lack of interest in innovation. But we do see discrepancies when we come again to leadership positions in these biotech companies. This is just some data from 2013 to 2018. Only 19 women, 6 of those being women of color, having been CEOs of biotech companies. And these are biotech companies making their IPOs. And 15% of the companies surveyed had no women in leadership roles whatsoever. And we know that when women are in leadership role positions, that they're not in STEM related roles. They'll be in your human resources, they'll be in the diversity and inclusion role, or say communications, not you know, undercutting the importance of those roles. But again, they're not in those STEM roles. Again, we looking at how entrepreneurial women are and the fact that women are largely making up the pool of those getting bachelor's degrees in science and master's degrees in science. That pool of qualified women are there. And so entrepreneurship really strikes me as the way to give women a voice and to give them some autonomy when it comes to making decisions around innovation and commercialization of their ideas. And so AAAS has a STEM to Market initiative, and this STEM to Market program actually provides inclusive accelerator program to STEM trained women. And this is all around good for the entire STEM ecosystem, right? You have women who have improved finances, you're creating more jobs, you're increasing innovation from the lens of women, and creating this ecosystem of women from various backgrounds. And just, you know, this data just shows that even participation in the STEM to Market program at AAAS actually more so favors women of color as far as participants. And I am a proud participant in the AAAS STEM to Market program with one of my companies, and being in an accelerator program with other women, especially other women who are also concerned about the issues that I've raised, has been an invaluable experience on top of being a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow. So again, I want to close and just advise, you know, anyone, you know, obviously you all are interested in science policy, very, very much so. I think that as you continue on in your careers, making sure that your interest in science policy actually aligns with your passions, and the scientific expertise is important, and it will be there, but you'll be able to build on that expertise. I'm clearly not the straight path person, but I've been able to build on, you know, my experience in the biomedical sciences as a budding entrepreneur, used that for outreach, and then have taken that into my career in policy. I urge everyone to encourage other women, especially women of color, when you're in these spaces. Use your voice to empower those women to align their passions with issues related to science policy, and hold other groups accountable. Again, I do feel that that is one of the most important tools you have as a science policy agent. And that is all that I have. If you have questions that you don't think are appropriate for Twitter, you can email me at bbayon@me.com. Thank you.